right, so here's our Ferris wheel question. How high above the ground is a person when they get on? 5 feet. And the radius is 20. How did you figure out that the radius was 20 feet?
I counted up the whole distance from the ground, so 5
So
to 45.
5 to 45 to the top.
I know radius is half a diameter, so I just divided by
Okay, good. So that makes the whole diameter of our Ferris wheel 40, and then radius is half our diameter. That means that the middle of this, our sinusoidal axis, is going to be at y equals 25. What is the time for one revolution? 2 minutes. So if we take this graph and take that information, we could write down what the d, the a, and the b values are. What is our sinusoidal axis? That's right in the middle, that's 25. Our amplitude, notice that our amplitude in this case is going to be exactly the same as our radius. It's going to be 20. Now our b value is based on our period, and our period is 2. So one of the things that we've been looking at is we know that we have a formula that our period is 2 pi over our b value. We can rearrange that formula, and our b value is always 2 pi over our period. So if our period is 2, our b value would be 2 pi divided by 2, which is just pi. If you can figure out the d, the a, and the b value, you can write an equation for sine and cos. So the only thing we haven't figured out is our c value, but I'm going to write two equations right now. My amplitude is 20. I'm going to leave space out in front because we're going to decide if we're going to do positive sine graphs or negative sine graphs, positive cos graphs or negative cos graphs. So for 20, here's sine, here's cos. Our b value would be pi for both of them. I'm going to leave space for my c value, and then my d value is plus 25 for both of them. So the d, the a, and the b value are identical whether you're trying to write an equation for sine or an equation for cos. Now to write your equation for sine, where does a sine graph normally start? Sine graph normally starts on your center line going up. So can you find one of those points on our graph? Yes. There's one right here. There's another one right here. There's another one right here. You could choose any one of them. It doesn't matter. But if we chose that first one, where is that? That's 0.5 to the right. So that means that our c value for our sine graph would be minus 0.5. Where does a cos graph start? At a maximum. Can you easily find a maximum on our graph? Yes, there's one right here. That's a shift of 1 to the right. So we can write this as x minus 1. I'm going to write one more graph. Probably the most common equation that would come from this graph would be this one. With cos, and there would be a negative out in front. Because where does a negative cos graph start? At a minimum. And if we start at a minimum, which makes a lot of sense in this graph because then you have no shift whatsoever. And so then my equation just has b times x, because there would be no c value. You could write plus 0 in there if you wanted to, but you wouldn't need to. All three of those, if you type them into y equals, produce exactly the same graph. They will draw exactly that graph that we saw up there. So when you're asked to write an equation, there's more than one right answer. Now on the next page it asked you to graph this. Again, for graphing, we think about what our D value, A value, and B value are, graph it temporarily, and then graph it after with our shift. So our D value here is 2. Our amplitude is 3. Our B value is pi. This means our period is going to equal 2 pi over our B value. Our period is going to equal 2. I'm going to graph this on a separate graph, x and y. Our center line is at 2, so we go up to 2, start with that as our center line. Since our amplitude is 3, we use our amplitude to find our maximum, so I go up 3, that'll take us up to 5, and down 3, which will take us down to -1, to mark our maximum and minimum on our graph. If the period is 2, so notice this time that we don't have pi in our period. It's just 2. So you pick some point along your x-axis and mark 2 and divide it into 4 equal sections. So 1, 0.5, 1.5. And in this example, it's a sine graph. Where does sine start? Sine starts in the middle, going up. So we go middle, to maximum, back to the middle, down to a minimum, back to the middle. And I'll just graph that with a dotted line for now, because we haven't done our shift. Then our C value is 1 to the right. So now we take each of those points. This one, shift it 1 to the right. This one, shift it 1 to the right. 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 And here is our final graph with all those values.